Welcome to Garden Plants with Jim Putnam. Let's talk Dwarf Burford Holly. This is Ilex cornuta Dwarf Burford, or otherwise known as Dwarf Burford Holly. This is a dwarf of Burford Holly, and I've seen Burford Hollies 25 feet in height. This thing, I think, doesn't ever stop growing, so it's some possibility. It's just, we'll call it slower growing Burford Holly rather than a Dwarf Burford Holly. Has a rounded habit, great glossy green foliage, forms berries that the birds absolutely love. It has a single point on the end of the leaf, which is pretty desirable in comparison to older varieties that had, 5 points on the leaf that were quite wicked. So it's much easier to garden with Dwarf Burford than some of the old varieties. So you might see tags where Dwarf Burford is going to say 6 to 8 feet in height or 8 to 10 feet in height, something like that. Again, they can get bigger than that if you let them. I had one at the nursery that we actually used for cuttings that had reached, before I sold off the nursery, probably 12 feet in height and almost 12 feet in width. So almost equal width to height on this thing, but it can be kept smaller than that and can be kept narrower than that as well. So don't let that scare you off. It is a great evergreen shrub. Growth rates moderate and faster in time. Okay, so when you initially put it in the ground, you may not get a whole lot of growth out of it the first year. You'll see in future years it can really put on a lot of growth over the course of a season. And if you're cutting one down, let's say you did a reset on one of these, you had it 8 feet tall and you cut it down to 4 feet, it can almost get back to 8 feet in a single season because now you got a big root system on it to support it. So in time, faster growing. They'll get white, kind of fragrant flowers on them. Pollinators love them in the springtime. These are self-fruiting, so you will get the berries, the male and female flowers. They'll cross on the same plant. If you have more of them, you tend to get a bigger berry set. That's true with any self-fruiting plants. If you have more of them out there to offer, more likely you are to get pollination and to get berries on them. Birds absolutely love the fruit on these. Dwarf Burford is going to be hardy in zones 7 to 9. Probably folks in zone 6B in a protected space wouldn't have any problem with these either. They're great, just great evergreen plants. In terms of sun or shade, as you get down into zone 9, you probably want some afternoon shade on it. It probably wouldn't like to sit out in 15 hours of direct sun in zone 9 in the deep south. Those of us here where I'm at in zone 7B, 8A makes a great full sun plant and part shade. I mean, really kind of both. They'll probably stretch a little more. If you're growing them in some shade, they're probably going to reach just a bit more, so it won't be quite as dense and full as this, but a little bit of pruning can balance that out, no problem. I don't know that this is the best foundation plant ever just because of the width that it grows, but if you had high windows, you could use it on a foundation, but keep in mind, it gets wider. I would probably switch over to needlepoint if I was going to use one of these on a foundation because it will stay slightly narrower and it's just more upright in habit. If you've got that kind of space, go for it. Great plant. Obviously a very good screening plant. So these can be, in a hedgerow of 3 or 5 of them. I like to use mixed things when I'm doing screening plants, but certainly you could put 3 or 5 of these together in a row and then rotate it with something else, and it will become a big, thick hedgerow that you couldn't drive a car through. Honestly, they just get quite thick that way. I think sometimes people have, large lots and they don't necessarily put plants on it that can scale to the size of the garden. And so this is a great plant, just as a 1 or in a group of 3 toward the back of a bed that you can allow to get big and kind of fit the scale of a larger garden and then have smaller things out in front of it. They can also be limbed up into a small tree if you want to as well. Like every holly you're going to purchase, these are acid-loving plants. So they like slightly acidic soil. In high alkaline soils, they can definitely off-color, become yellow. You can see that in the leaf. You'll see the veins of the leaf still stay dark green. The rest of the leaf will yellow. That's an iron deficiency, generally caused by high alkaline soils. They don't mind clay. They don't mind sand. They don't mind anything. I mound them up a little bit, keep them mulched, water them in well. Once these are established, they're very drought tolerant, quite a bit more drought tolerant than Japanese hollies. These broadleaf hollies tend to, once they get established, if you're in an area that gets pretty regular rainfall, it would have to go a long time for me to have one of these. If one of these was in the ground 3, 4, 5 years, it'd have to go a month during the summer probably before I'm going to drag a water hose over to it. You can go check on them. You know, if they're thinning, typically these will thin in the interior. You'll see some yellow leaves, and the interior will start to drop out and they'll start to thin, because what they're doing is just shedding some of the oldest foliage so that they don't have to sacrifice any of this year's growth or this year's flowers or this year's berries. So that's their response to drought. That's what to be on the lookout for. But again, once they're pretty well established, you're not going to have to water them very much. If you were going to use these in zone 6B, 7A, you might want to think about not having them in high wind areas. Some of these leafy evergreens can be sensitive to, you know, the wind blowing on them all winter long and desiccating them, basically taking the water out of the leaves faster than the roots could ever respond and put water back up into the top of it. So keep that in mind. By 7B, 8A, they can be out in open space without any problem. These, so again, we're planting them, keeping them well mulched, watering them in well. I'll fertilize these in the late winter. If you have higher alkaline soil towards pH of 7 or higher, you probably want to use something like Hollytone or some sort of acidifying fertilizer. Those of us here in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, our pH is already pretty low, and we can just get away with any kind of organic fertilizer once a year toward late winter. These can be pruned in the winter time, but there's never a great time to prune these fruiting, flowering hollies. So I would put this thing where you can allow it to get some size on it and not have to hack on it all the time. Because we're trying, you know, they come out in the early spring and flower, and then they set the berries turn red in the fall, the birds eventually take them. There's like a cycle going on here that any kind of hard pruning on is definitely going to disrupt for some period of time. So keep in mind, if you prune it, go ahead and just whack the thing down pretty hard so you don't have to do it over and over and over again, and you can enjoy all the parts that this plant can add to your landscape. Lastly, these will get, most pest issues related to these are stress related. So anytime I've seen any kind of mites or scale insects you'll get scale along the stems, almost always related to some drought situation or some sort of drought or overwatering, underwatering, you know, just not in a happy space. So keep that in mind. Any pest related issue, examine it from a why is my plant not able to fight this off kind of thing. Otherwise, if they're vigorous and happy, you won't really have any pest problems. So that's it. That's Dwarf Burford Holly. Thanks for watching.